Welcome to the Promo Perspectives podcast presented by Sage, dedicated to giving promotional product suppliers and distributors tips, tricks, and insights to help them grow their businesses. I'm Gabe Gotay, Senior Marketing Coordinator here at Sage, and today we are continuing our discussion on social media. Sage got the #1 spot on the PPAI Online 18. It's their list of the top performing companies and individuals on social media in our industry. We got #1 for a handful of reasons, but one of the top reasons was the high quality of our video content. So this episode and our next episode are going to be talking all about filming video content, and I am joined by our esteemed producer, LaFonso Brown. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you for having me. It's fun being on this side of the table for once.
It is great to have you here. You know, normally LaFonso is back there making this whole thing look so great, and just to kick us off right there, I mean, the podcast itself is an example of your your skill elevating our content. Because, before we had the podcast, we did marketing webinars, which was just, somebody from the marketing department or one of the salespeople in front of their laptops using the laptop camera in their office. And that's fine. We do all kinds of educational webinars, but we have a phenomenal studio here. We had one at our old office too, and I saw all the work you did, and I was like, well, let's just bring him in on this. And that was right there. They said the production of this podcast is one of the reasons we won. So your skill paid off right away.
Well, I'm glad it paid off. Like putting the studio together was a feat in itself. It was a hard decision in the beginning, but we made it. We got good cameras, we got good lights, good microphones, and then it all sort of happened.
Well, before we dive into some of these specifics, why don't you kind of introduce yourself a little more to the audience, tell them who you are, your background, how you got into video production, and your time here at Sage.
Hi, everyone. I'm LaFonso Brown with Sage. I'm the video production manager here. I've been with Sage now going on 9 years, so I've seen the growth and the change of the company since the beginning. I got started in video way back in high school, if you can believe it. I volunteered to film this concert that my school was having. They were filming for DVDs, and they were going to sell them after the show. And I got a camera in my hand. I was moving around the stage. I felt the energy. We had screens like projecting the camera feed, and I just loved it so much. And I was like, this is what I want to do.
And you were using the school's equipment for that?
No, the school actually hired a company. So they outsourced. All the equipment was from that company. It was a multi-camera production that was also filmed live. So
was that kind of your introduction to professional camera equipment?
Introduction-ish. At the time, I was also a photographer at a place like a small 1-hour photo place in the mall. And I had been doing that about a year. And I liked photography. Don't get me wrong, it's really nice. But video has a much different vibe to it. So
well, and they say that a picture tells 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
And video is at least 30 frames a second. So
that's a lot of words.
That's 3,000 words every single second, depending on your frame rate.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say yeah. And so after that, I did a little bit of time in the military. Worked behind the scenes, like as a communications tech, working on camera equipment. And then I got out, went to film school, and here I am.
Well, talking about all the words that a picture can tell, right? Something we were talking about in our last episode with our social media coordinator is the importance of telling a story on social media, right? Like you have a message that you want to get across, you have a certain way you got to tell that message, and you want your audience to have to be impacted to do something specific when they see that, right? Now, I know that you are a big fan of all kinds of different kinds of entertainment media, from books, you and I read a lot of the same sci-fi and fantasy books, to movies and things like that. And I'm curious, does your understanding of narrative structure in something like a book or a movie impact your approach to producing video content?
Yes and no. I think that the basics of video are pretty much identical, no matter what the medium is or the type of video. For example, if you're filming a rom-com, a lot of those are really light. Like the lighting there's not a lot of shadows. They're usually evenly lit. And so it really depends on what you're going for. You can take the things that you see that work and the things that you love and apply that to your own video process. So if it's the lighting or if it's the camera angles or if it's the type of shot, I guess yes. The answer is yes. It all can translate.
Well, you can take multiple things. Like there's the technical side of things, like how are you lighting a shot? How are you shooting that shot, right? Like you can look and, oh, I like this in this movie. Can I apply this to my product, right? Like we had somebody on the live stream of the social media episode, they said, all I post are pictures of my products. How can I spice that up, right? And I didn't see that particular person's actual social media feed, but if it's just like a static, not that well lit shot, there's some very basic things they could do, just to research some ways to light things. Or if they saw a movie they really liked and they saw the way a camera moved around something in that movie and it made them feel a certain way, it might sound silly, but like you said, you can take what you saw there and apply it to that cup, and suddenly it's a way more engaging shot.
Oh yeah, much better than just a cup in front of a background. Mm-hmm. I want to shout out Anne-Marie because her answer there was also really, really good about if you're using a cup to use it in its natural habitat. I thought that was interesting. And then apply camera motion to that, and now you got something special.
Oh yeah. Well, I know that something that a lot of our audience is going to be wondering is, how am I supposed to do that? Because, we'll get into the next episode we're going to talk more about your specific process because you have, A, lot of experience, and B, some pretty fancy toys. We can talk about this right now. We'll get more details later. Tell us a little bit about just the equipment we're using right now to film this podcast.
Okay, so right now we have some Kino lights. Those are our key lights at the front. And we have some fill lights here at the back. We're using 3 Blackmagic cameras. One of them is a 4.6K camera. We have Taylor is in the back. She's actually doing our switching right now. We have a Blackmagic switcher. We have a pretty nice audio mixer, and everything's pretty much ran through there.
And it's not cheap to get this kind of equipment, right?
Oh, it is not, no.
But you don't necessarily need that kind of equipment to get high quality things. So we're going to make some suggestions to our audience on what they can do on a budget. But before we move into specific recommendations, can you kind of break down some of the key principles, maybe some of the rules of video production that everybody can take away no matter how they're putting it together?
All right, so main things, the first steps I normally take when I'm setting up a camera is you want to have a good white balance and a good focus. Like always white balance, always focus. A lot of the phone cameras and modern cameras will do that for you with auto settings. But if you want a little bit more control and creativity, going into manual and making sure you have those things on point is key. There's some other rules of video, like you don't want to cut off people's heads. So you want to give everybody a good enough headroom so that, they're not cut off in the frame. You want to give people enough look room too. And that's the space, if you're looking in the direction, just hit the mic. If you're looking in the direction, the space in front of the person is the look room. And you want to make sure that they have enough space there too. And so the reason that you want to check all of these things is they all have a purpose. And they're all sort of rules, but you can break them. So if you want to make something feel claustrophobic, then take away the look room, and now they're looking into the edge of the frame and they feel, isolated and alone. So, all of these rules, you can break them. Even the rule with the focus, if you're shooting something soft focus and you want it to look sort of like somebody's in a daze or something, and you can sort of use that kind of a technique. But the key is to understand the rules and stick to them as much as you can. And if you do, your content will be good.
Well, and let's talk about a specific example there, just kind of based on the advice that Anne-Marie gave and what you just said, specifically about making things feel claustrophobic. That might not be something you want, generally speaking. That's a negative emotion that you can evoke with the camera. But say you're making a point in the story you're telling about your video. Let's stick to this cup analogy. Let's say, first of all, you want to show a generic version of a less good cup, and you have a bunch of them crammed into a dishwasher and they look terrible and the shot makes you feel claustrophobic and all these negative emotions. And then the next shot is the cup is out in its environment. Maybe it's like a tumbler that somebody has and they're out at their kid's soccer game and it's airy and it makes them feel open. That's a combination of breaking these rules and following these rules to drive home a point that at no point in that video, you could do it completely without voiceover. You don't say, this is the tumbler for you because it's great. You just evoke emotions with what you're doing with the camera, and that's really important, especially in social media, because you only have very small amounts of time to grab people's attention and get those points across.
Exactly. And a lot of the times, if you notice the technique, then it's done incorrectly. So a lot of the things that happen with video are more on a subconscious level. So when people know it when they see it, like they don't know why they all of a sudden don't like those crowded cups or, but it's one of those things that evokes emotion and it drives people to action. And you can do all of that through the type of shots that you select.
Well, and so let's talk about some of the specific equipment and how you might do things on a budget. So earlier when I asked you about what we have in here, I kind of picked out 3 categories there. You talked about our cameras, our audio equipment, and our lighting equipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You already kind of answered this question with the cameras, which is that, and Anne-Marie said the same thing, every smartphone now has a camera that rivals what amateur professionals could have done 20 years ago, right?
That is true. The smartphone cameras are really, really good, and some professionals would be hard-pressed if the shot is well lit and the audio's good to distinguish between the brands of cameras.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's lots of, I know Apple does a lot of their advertising in terms of they will work with indie film producers to specifically produce a whole film on an iPhone, but a lot of those shots only look as good as they do because, like you said, everything surrounding it, the set design, the production design, the lighting, and the audio is also good. So let's talk about some specific examples. So let's say you are a distributor and you are at a trade show, or let's say you're a supplier actually, and you have products that you're showing off at a trade show. A great way to make some grid video, social media content while you're putting all that time on the show floor, film some interviews with distributors that have done things for you. And if you have, say, an iPhone, an affordable but sturdy tripod, because, handheld, this is one of those rules you can break. Handheld tends to look shakier and less professional, and there might be a use for that, but if you can get a steady shot, they sell all kinds of very affordable lighting equipment on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
And then,
so I would say like the basics for a good camera bag. If you're going to use your iPhone, if you're on a budget, that's fine for your camera source. A tripod of some kind will come in handy big time, especially for things like interviews. You would want a good microphone. I would say above $50. Microphones can get really cheap, but you sort of get what you pay for on those. And then a light that maybe has some adjustable brightness or color temperature. That way, if you're shooting in different environments, you can adjust the quality of the light that you're using. And with those key things, I would say you need all of them. You need the camera, you need the mic, and you need the lighting. Good lighting can make up for a bad camera in many instances. And if you're using your phone, you're going to really care about the quality of the light that you're putting out there. And audio is half the experience. So a good microphone that's like 50% of the thing that you're putting out. If it's just your product, it's a cup. The music that you select, or if there's some type of voiceover or sound effects or something like that, that's half the experience. So you also want that to be good. But yeah, that's the keys for every camera bag. And from there, you can add way more stuff, but that's the basics.
And that is like the lowest, most budget thing. Like you could probably, if we're not counting the cost of the phone, because let's say that's probably something you have anyway, I'm sure you could put together a little travel bag of camera equipment or of a recording equipment for less than $1,000, right?
Right.
But let's say somebody's willing to spend just a little bit more than that. Maybe not the tens of thousands of dollars for like the fanciest of cameras, but what would the next step up be?
I would say probably the next step up is more expensive lights, and again, you get where you pay for as far as features go, and maybe a DSLR. Canons are my favorite brand, so I use Canon and Rebel for most of the things that I shoot. It's super easy to use, it's portable, it's light, a lot of battery, a lot of storage. It's a really good camera. So a DSLR, and that's when you get into manual features where you can adjust your color temperature and you can have way more control over the image that you get. With a camera phone, you sort of get the image. There's a little slider where you can adjust the brightness and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're sort of locked in. And as a professional who wants my exact vision to be what I show, I like to have that control with the manual mode.
And I think some people, when they see those manual modes on the cameras, because I think just about everybody, whether or not they own a DSLR, has been at a birthday party or a wedding or something, and somebody has handed them their DSLR, and what's the first thing that person always says? Just put it on the auto mode, point and shoot. And they see all those other settings, and they get intimidated. But I think it's one of those things that with a little bit of time, it's not too complicated to learn some of the basic ins and outs of that, right?
Yeah, and once you learn it on one camera, it's pretty much the same. The buttons might be in different places, but the way the feature works is the same. Selecting a white balance is the same, you know? So once you learn it, then you know it.
I mean, even small things like, an f-stop, right? Like, so I remember I used to work for it was a furniture company, and they didn't have a marketing department. It was a very small business. And so most of their marketing was just point and shoot auto, green setting on the camera, pictures of chairs and desks. And honestly, because of the way the company was built, that worked enough for what they were doing. But when I came on, they sent me to a little photography school here in Dallas, just for a few months, just once a week for a handful of months, just to learn those ins and outs. And by the way, you don't have to go to a school for this. YouTube, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, all these different websites provide really comprehensive and very cheap, if not free, educational things. And just on that, you learn how to adjust the aperture to soften the background of an image so that the thing in the foreground is what's sharp. And just those small differences really drive home an absolute amateur from a slightly above amateur.
I'm surprised that's a really good point, and that's pretty much something you can only do in manual mode on most cameras. I know the iPhone has like a studio setting that sort of blurs the background, but you have very little control over that, and I believe it's like a digital effect, so it's not the real deal. It's just a step up above like blur and zoom kind of thing. But if you have a good camera and a low enough aperture, and some really good lights, you can blur the background and you can make it look really cinematic. So yeah, props to them for sending you to that school.
And that was, even if you don't think you're going to go all out on your production for your social media, getting to do that, getting to learn that has been such a valuable skill for me. So and like you said, it's stuck. Even now that I've moved more into like marketing project management and I'm not really behind cameras so much anymore, I still have these skills and I'm able to take them out when it's necessary, or when I'm working with a video producer, having that vocabulary really helps us share and create a vision. So really highly recommend that any distributor, any supplier, anybody, take the time, head on YouTube and learn some of the basic ins and outs of the cameras, of the audio equipment. Because, that was another thing too, like when we started the podcast, is starting to, like I said, the webinars used to be on these laptops coming through. And yes, camera and microphone technology on laptops, like the phones, miles beyond what it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
But you do a little research and you realize, I think anybody that is watching the video version of this podcast and sees these microphones, they don't think about it, but they're like, oh yeah, that's the microphone that every single podcast uses. That's the podcast microphone. And there's a reason for it. Just some of the technical capabilities of these microphones, you don't even have to fully understand them, but just having a base understanding of why to use them in this scenario improves your overall production quality.
I completely agree. And yeah, the picking the microphones, like it is the microphone that a lot of people use, but I think our very first one, we used the lavalier microphone. There was a lot of problems there. And so it was like you live and you learn kind of a situation. We've upgraded our mixers because these mics in particular require a certain level of gain that most mixers just cannot put out, not without extra equipment. So yeah, I think that the rules, the equipment, all of that stuff is important, but all of that stuff is the foundation. It's the beginning. And after you get all of those things, you've gone to YouTube or Skillshare or somewhere and you learned how to use your camera and you learned how to use your equipment, then you want to tell a story. And I think that is the key. Everyone's story is unique. Everyone's products are unique. And all you have to do is tell that story, tell your story. And by default, you're telling a unique story.
Mm-hmm. That's what's been really great, like about doing the podcast, right, is because I host every episode, I am not the expert on almost any of the things we talk about. I barely know about some of the things we talk about till we go, but you bring on people who are the expert and you just let them tell their story and it comes across so much more clearly. And that's something that's kind of live and off the cuff. When you're producing video content, you can take a minute and think about that and how are you going to tell your story. And as you get better over time, you'll be able to use production techniques to improve the quality of that story with more subtle things. Like, Talk a little bit about motion. I know that's a huge thing for you in the way you produce.
Well, motion is huge. So essentially, you can evoke a response, like an emotional subconscious response, just with motion. So bear with me for a minute while I walk you through this scenario. So imagine you have a girl and she's sitting in a field. It's daytime. The camera's close, and you can see her eye color. It's close, and it slowly backs away. You can see a little bit more of the field. It's mostly empty. It backs away. Now she's a small dot. You can barely tell that it's even a person there. And then it backs away, and now all you see is this giant field, and you can barely even make out the girl. She's just a dot. Same scenario, reversed. You're far away. It's this giant field. What's there? You can't really tell. You get closer. Okay, it's a girl. She's surrounded by flowers. You get closer. Now you can see her eye color. One is a dolly out, one's a dolly in. The emotions that you evoke are, if you're backing away from someone, they get smaller. Like physically, they get smaller in the frame. And that makes them feel small in the shot. And it evokes an emotion of like isolation. And the reverse is also true. As you get closer, they get bigger in the frame. You get to know them more. You're getting physically closer to them. And that's just with two specific camera movements. And if you can understand the ideas behind camera motion, you can tell really powerful stories without even using words.
This is why I think it is important if you want, specifically if you want to be a person producing video and you want to improve your visual storytelling, go watch movies, right? Like, I find it interesting to study the history of production in Hollywood, because you look at the earliest talkies, or whatever they called them back in the day, right? And a lot of them are just fixed camera shots, right? And they're only telling the story with what's moving within the frame. But then you have things like the first dollies, zooms, and movements that were coming out. You don't think twice about them now, but it's why certain films back, in like the 30s and the 40s and the 50s were so revolutionary at the time, because people weren't doing those things. And you kind of, now every movie does them, so you don't even pay attention to them. But if you go pick out, say, a movie from each decade and watch them and see how things change, you'll start to notice these little things, and then you can apply them to what you're producing. And that's just the way of art, right? Like, it's very much the same way with music, where a lot of people might go now and listen to the Beatles or the Beach Boys and be like, okay, that's fine, but why were they the biggest bands in the world at the time? Well, listen to what was coming out before them, and you don't hear a lot of the things they're doing, and listen to what came out after them and hear all of those same things. It's the tiny little technique differences that stack up on each other over time in any art form, and you can learn from them by just taking those things in.
Yeah, some other examples of that are the camera angle. So tilting the camera up and down. If you're shooting a person from down low and you're shooting up at them, then they have more power. They look more powerful or big. You'll see this technique a lot in like superhero movies, where the superhero shot at a slightly lower angle with some superpose, and it just makes them feel bigger than human, And you can shoot at a higher angle shooting down, and the person looks a lot smaller. This is done usually in movies with children, like Matilda. There was a lot of low angle shots in that. It's a much older movie, but one of my favorites. Just watched it recently. So that's the camera angle. You can do motion. You can break the rules. You can make people feel claustrophobic by taking away their look room or their head room. The camera techniques and telling your story, learning them is how you can tell a story technically. But it's not just the camera. It's also the lighting. If you light somebody with a light that's on the ground pointing up, like, sure, it makes a good shot for like a band on a stage, but also it makes a really creepy movie. Just imagine a flashlight held low pointing up at your face, and everybody's probably seen that image. And so you can take all the basics, you learn the basics, and you can use them to tell the story that you want to tell. I will say that when I first started film school and I learned about the different types of shots, like the two shot where there's two people in the frame, or the one shot. I believe these are medium close-ups that we're doing right now. And like, you learn about these things and then you see them in everything, because they're the basics, and every movie has them, every commercial has them, and they're everywhere. And I thought that it was gonna take away the experience, But the magic to movies and to telling a good story and even things on social media is that when it's done well, nobody notices. When it's done well, it's invisible and you're sort of alone for the ride. And I love to tell stories. And behind the scenes, of course, with the storyboards and the script and all of that stuff, I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I know why I'm doing the type of motion that I'm doing or picking the type of shot that I'm picking. But the audience doesn't know. And it's just a fun way to just bring them into my world for however long they stay on that post.
I mean, this is like the production of promotional products, right? Like, you know, you and I are passionate about film and production and things like that, so we know these things that people aren't going to notice. Somebody who's a decorator probably has a similar level of knowledge, maybe passion, about embroidery, right? And they might know some of the tips and tricks to production that when it comes out on a great embroidered hat, the person who gets that hat is not even going to think about that. They're just going to see it's a good hat. Because if they think about the embroidery on the hat, it means something was done wrong.
Exactly.
And, you know, I think it's really cool that the best way to do it is to take in entertainment. I think that's what made kind of production so interesting for me, is that the legwork for getting how to do it involves taking in entertainment. Like, you know, you mentioned the Matilda movie, and I think another great way to gain insights on how you tell stories with camera is if you were a reader and there's a movie based on a book and you have the time and you like them, read the book and see how the movie was adapted. Like, you know, a lot of people will get upset like, oh, scenes were cut, this isn't what happened. Don't pay attention to that. Pay attention to the book made me feel this way with words, and then the movie made me feel that way with this camera movement or with this framing of an actor. And it is just, you know, it's a little bit of homework, but I love homework that involves entertainment. So
I'm curious, Gabe, what are some of your favorite movies and TV shows?
Well, love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is one of those examples to me when it comes to like taking a story. Also one of my favorite books, right? Like that's a great way. I mean, so the production on those movies is phenomenal. And obviously some of this stuff, we're getting into the nerdy weeds, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, audience. About how you adapt a certain feeling. And the technical things they did in those movies were crazy. Like, you know, you have these hobbits and these giant wizards, but you have totally normal size actors. How do you make that disparity clear? And they do it with perspective tricks. And then when they shoot, you know, they filmed in New Zealand, so if they want to show this long journey that the characters are going on, they have these, you talked about like the girl in the field and pulling back, right? So they show way back helicopter panning shots of this beautiful scenery and these tiny little actors running around, and like those are the kinds of things that tell that story.
Exactly. And Game of Thrones is pretty much the same too. That show is very well done, and they tell so much of the story without words. The dialogue is phenomenal, and the sound effects and the set and the costumes and all of that. But so much of the story can be told without words. That's the type of show that you can mute and still know exactly what's going on and who's good and who's evil and all of those kind of things.
I did, you know, and I was late to the game on that show, but I read the first book this year, and then as I was reading the book, I started to watch the show, and as the show would catch up towards where I was in the book, I'd stop watching it, and I was blown away by like things that were like, you know, written in the book describing a scene or describing a character's inner thoughts, and how they managed to portray that on camera without saying it. And somebody who didn't read the books would get that feeling and not know why, but then reading the books and seeing that that was specifically the feeling they were trying to evoke. It is great. I do feel like you and I could sit here and talk about movies and adaptations for forever. But really, I think the point of this episode, a couple of things. One, to talk about the importance of video, some of the key rules, kind of gave some advice on how to produce on a budget for social media, and then really to dive into the importance of telling a story and some of the ways you can do that. In the next episode, you and I are going to sit down and we're going to get into some more of the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about your actual process from pre-production, ideation, you know, deciding what are we trying to tell, how are we going to do it, executing that plan in production, and then working in post-production to do editing and all the tools associated with that. We'll dive into the nitty-gritty, you know, tell you the tools we use, offer you some alternatives, and again, point you in some directions to learn how to use these things. LaFonso, it's been awesome to have you on this side of the camera. This is one of my favorite topics, so thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, we'll see you on the next one.